And we are live. It is August 4th, Monday, August 4th, 2014 for Indigenous Peoples Week number 4. Drum roll, please. And greetings to Anders Kerstedt in Sweden. God morgon.
Good morning, Ron.
So this is number 4 Indigenous Peoples Week for us. Thank you very much for co-partnering in this.
Thank you, Ron. It's a privilege that we can actually make this a tradition.
4-year tradition. How about that, folks? For anyone watching online, you are welcome to ask questions. The Q&A app is live in the Google Hangout, and we'll also be showcasing something for the first time in Indigenous Peoples Week, and that is the showcase in Peoples Week in our Google Hangout. Our showcase will feature some of the websites. And again, this conference is taking place all over the place. Years ago, when Anders and I first got in contact, we were doing the Indigenous Tourism and Biodiversity Website Award, and Anders kind of summed it up pretty well. He said, "You have to be everywhere at once." Can you explain that, Anders?
Well, it's the way that the web works today, that you can't just have a website. You have to use all the tools that are there, and with the strategy behind it. But you have to be a little bit of everywhere to be paid any attention.
Can you give us a little thumbnail about Nutti Sámi Siida?
Well, Nutti Sámi Siida is an indigenous Sámi company owned by Sámis that runs tourism operations in northern Sweden. And we try to provide a market with genuine Sámi cultural trips. So we use a whole lot of reindeer for reindeer sledding and adventures like that.
Okay. And are there many Sámi-owned businesses?
Not that many, no. I would say there is around maybe 20 in Sweden, if I count a lot of them.
Okay.
That are not really new.
And can you tell us a little bit about your past weekend, where you were, what you were doing?
Well, we had there is a summer fair or market in the little village of Jukkasjärvi, just outside Kiruna, where the company is situated, and it's traditionally held way back. But this year we decided that we would have a Sámi market at the same place. And as we have a small outdoor museum there, so we built up a marketplace for some Sámi craftsmen. So they were there showing and selling. And we also had some entertainment with joik singing and things like that, traditional Sámi singing.
And is this the same place for that wonderful winter market?
It's the place for a wonderful winter market too, yes. But it's not the big winter market. The big winter market is in Jokkmokk. It's further south.
Jokkmokk is further south?
Yeah.
And the name of this market this weekend was called what?
Jukkasjärvi, summer market. Jukkasjärvi is the place outside Kiruna where the Ice Hotel is situated.
Beautiful. I get my J-towns confused in Sweden. So sorry about that. When we started this 4 years ago, it was kind of as a reunion of sorts of folks from the ITBW award, and it was a way of us keeping up our skills. When you look back in the past 5 years that we've been in contact, is using the social web, using these channels, is it easier? Is it more useful as a business? How would you describe the change in the past 5 years?
Well, first of all, you get more experienced using it. I mean, and there are also more tools to use it, which actually demands that you have a good strategy for what medias you are actually using. You can't be anywhere. because I mean there are so many tools that you can use and many sites that you can be on. So you must also have the time to update them. But if you have a strategy for what you like to achieve with your presence on the internet, then it's much easier. And then you pick out what you find is the best tools to use. So, I mean, if you like to show people pictures, I mean, maybe Facebook is not the best one. You can use Flickr instead. And you can use Twitter with the limitations of Twitter. You can use it for short messages, like short news reports or something like that. But you must know what you are doing, because you can't just publish everything everywhere if you don't have eons of time, of course.
And you found you've been pretty successful with Facebook as well, right?
Yeah, we think so. Yeah, there's we are still increasing every month in the numbers of people that follow us, and we have good interaction on the site. There's always, whenever we publish something, there's almost always some comments or some a whole lot of people share our publications on Facebook. So there's good interactivity on that one.
Oh, very, 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 very good. I want to just kind of run through, just show people the wiki page that we've set up for Indigenous Peoples Week. Tell me if you can see the screen, Anders.
That's fine. It works.
Yay! So this is the Planeta Wiki, and this is our Indigenous Peoples Week page for 2014. It's now been edited 111 times, and it links to our Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Outbounding Q&A. We'll get to that in a sec. Flipboard, YouTube, Slideshare, Storify. We're doing that in a big way this year, and of course the IPW4 hashtag. We're now officially 40 minutes into Indigenous Peoples Week, so yay. This wiki page gives you a little bit of the background of how we set this up. I want to also extend a big thanks to Eating Gulber and the Travel Word, another co-host in this endeavor. And again, it's all about the background. We'll get into a little bit of the history of this, but it says Indigenous Peoples Week wraps around August 9th, the United Nations International Day of the World's Indigenous People. And, you know, back around 5 years ago, I think, you know, we talked about this and basically said that at a public level, not many people around the planet seem to be aware of the International Day. Is it now more popular than ever in Sweden?
I wouldn't say that. No, it's one of these days that just pass. Nobody notices.
When I lived in Mexico, you know, we would always read the stories on August 10th of how the government had such and such an event or such and such a ceremony. But again, it just it deserves more awareness. And every year the UN chooses a different thematic approach to the day, August 9th. And again, this we wrapped our week around that day. It's not officially affiliated with it, but we would like to draw attention to it. And you know, the focus of our week is on travel and tourism. So, you know, have at it. Any other comments on how the day and the week connect or don't connect in your view?
Well, I wouldn't say that our Indigenous Peoples Week depend on that day, but it's nice that if we can get more attention about the day and about this week, it's a good thing, really, because there's a huge lack of information about indigenous populations in the world, and most of the news that you have are negative news.
True. One of the things I just discovered this year is that this year's August 9th celebration sets up an Indigenous Peoples Congress that'll take place in New York in September. I'm assuming you haven't heard much about this.
I just know that there is a forum for indigenous populations within the UN,
So,
and they meet annually. But that's all I know about it.
so that so that's our current status. We're learning about it. We're learning about it together. I want to share my screen again and show you something from a website called Outbounding, Anders. And I don't know if you've heard of Outbounding, um, but it's a fairly new site. It was set up at the end of last year, and we're having a Q&A discussion about this. And one of the early questions was about the connection to the August 9th day, and I hope we've answered that we're paying attention and honoring the day, and we'd like to have more connection, but that's the extent of our connection. But I'd also like to draw your attention to this question and comment from Matthew Barker, and I won't be able to read this on your screen, so I'll read it out loud. And he asked a great question. Matthew asked, is it the case that indigenous-led tourism is always more successful in the richer economies? I'm thinking perhaps the Sámi in Scandinavia and the First Nations in Canada, which seem very successful compared to other places such as the Andes and parts of Southeast Asia, where the relationship between tourism and indigenous people tends to be much more exploitative, with some notable exceptions. Is that, what do you think of this assumption? And I
Well,
answered, we have no clue. But what would you say?
well, my idea is that it has to do with education, really. That you need to make a point. I mean, if you're not well educated and you're not really on speaking terms with the officials or the government, then it's hard to make a point really in matters when it comes to tourism. And it's easy to be exploited because you are a target being exotic,
One
and
second,
there's always
Anders, 1 second. You were frozen for the past 15 seconds, I think.
okay.
Can you repeat yourself when you were talking about education?
Yeah, okay. I said it. In my opinion, it's a matter of education because you need to be educated and or to know how to make your point when you're speaking to officials and to the government, and to people that like to make business of your culture, because there's always a kind of exotism about indigenous populations, and there's always people out there. If you don't take a stand and make a point and claim that you are human that can think yourself, there's always somebody that will use that fact and use you for cheap money and earn money on selling your culture. It's easy to get sold out.
When you look over the past, 20, 30, 40 years in Sweden, um, how has the Sami culture, how has it been presented?
In what way? In political sense, or
Well, that would be a good one, but I'm talking more in terms of tourism and for the visitors.
well, okay, yeah. The change has been that from being an object, we are now a subject. I mean, you can't find a tourist brochure from Sweden where there's not a Sami or a reindeer or something, or from northern Sweden especially, where there's not a Sami or a reindeer on the front page or a big picture inside the brochure. But it's rare that you find, if you go 40 years back, it was really, really rare that you found genuine products that were produced by Samis. For most of the time, it was like a Sami coming up to the hotel that the guest could take pictures or things like that. Especially around the tourist stations and in the mountain areas, it was quite usual that you had Samis that were selling handicraft or that people take picture of them in their traditional costumes. But that has changed a lot. I mean, nowadays there are those, as we are showing good examples, that you can actually make a living out of tourism and running it yourself. There's
Hmm.
more and more people into it.
You know, I was really intrigued by Matthew's question, and I was thinking, well, if that's the case, then why don't we see, a lot of other examples of successful indigenous tourism in Australia or in the United States? Um, and part of my answer was that it's not just economic. You talked about the education, and I was thinking it's also it's also a political. Um, what do I say? There's a lot of politics involved. To what degree do you accept and embrace and welcome the indigenous heritage in your country's identity? And if you don't have that, then it is really ripe for exploitation. But
But if you look at the movie industry in the U.S., how many movies there are with natives in the movies? But that's the worst kind of exploitation. I mean, they are mostly shown as bloodthirsty gangs running around and killing white people in the prairies. So, but I mean, there's hardly that you can read about the other side or see the other side in the movie.
that's right. And again, one of the goals for Indigenous Peoples Week is to highlight, some of the things that are changing. As you know, I'm a big fan of radio, and I think we're getting at least access to some wonderful radio programs as well as podcasts that are created by Indigenous peoples. And I know, and again, we go back to First Nations in Canada. They have some really top-notch programs. I'm thinking of Indigenous Waves. And again, it doesn't have to be my taste, but they're doing all sorts of wonderful mashups, including this vocal poetry and hip hop music.
Yeah.
Or you listen to programs by way of Australia and New Zealand. I'm thinking in Australia you have the wonderful program called Away, and in New Zealand, I'm terrible with my pronunciation. I believe it's Te Ahika, the Maori program. But again, if we have an opportunity to listen or see, what people have made, I think that's the next big jump. You've posted a couple of Sámi videos on the wiki. Um, are we seeing any sort of a growth of Sámi cinema?
Well, not really. No, there are there's also a big change in the way that you make movies about Samis today. I mean, in the 40s and 50s, there were foolish people running around in the background of scenes and in the movies, and now they are with this modern cinemas. With modern movies. They are the head characters. So it's a huge change, and they also, as those that I put on the wiki side, they are produced by Sami producers, so they show the Sami side of the history.
Hmm. And I think that's what we're trying. That's what we're, if anything, that we can get out of this week. I think that's it. A lot of people are producing some wonderful videos or audio podcast, or they have some really good, again, they have some really good tours, or they have really great crafts. The question is, how do we get people to find out about it and really appreciate it? So, the suggestion is, to use, if you're watching this, is to use the comment space below to provide some of your recommendations, suggestions, or questions, or to use Twitter or Flickr to again to share some of these resources. I am going to show you a couple other pages that we're looking at, and and I'm not sure if you've seen this, Anders. Are you familiar with the Storify website?
I am, yes.
So, as I say, I'm asking people to use the IPW4 hashtag to identify materials of interest or questions for Indigenous Peoples Week. And I'm doing something called curation. In other words, collecting the favorites that I see and posting them here on this page. Many thanks, Ivar Rukl, for his fan art posters. But we're seeing some really fine examples of Indigenous culture and Indigenous tours, and I'm storifying that or curating that on Storify right now with some 228 views. The other way I'm curating is something called Flipboard, and we're using this. It's a great app that just allows you to, again, create this pictorial collection of images or tweets about Indigenous peoples, Indigenous culture. If I go back to, if you click on any of the elements, for example, let's look at El Chilam Balam Radio. These are folks in the Maya world in the Yucatan of Mexico, and they have what I consider a really wonderful introduction to the Maya culture in Mexico. Not sure if this is going to work on this platform. But that's there. If we go back to the Flipboard, here's another item I think of interest. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Injalak Arts, and this is in the Northern Territory of Australia, and about the millennia-old art gallery on the wall there on Injalak Hill. So, you know, the information is out there. The question is finding it. And as a traveler, as a visitor, is to prepare yourself ahead of time before your trip so that you have access to the kind of tour and the kind of visit you'd like to make on your journey. And again, I think it's pretty hard. You know, if I plan a traditional vacation, you know, it's rarely with locals, and of the locals, it's rarely that it really pays attention to Indigenous culture. But I think if we become a little bit more discerning and a little bit more curious, we can actually find those options and be supportive of those options. Your views?
Well, in Sweden at least we are represented on the national tourism site, and I mean the local counties tourism sites, so that you can easily find Sámi tourism. And we have also the Swedish Ecotourism Society is helpful. So we have for the ecotourism certification in Sweden, we do have a website called Nature's Best, where you also can find Sámi companies. So if you are looking for the Sámi adventure, you can find it in a lot of places, more officially. So you don't have to go to the company directly. And we are also rather well represented on with tour operators abroad. So
but all of this is a progression. Wouldn't you say that all of that is a progression that didn't really exist 10 or 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's progression. Yes, of course. And it has to do with that you take your stand and whenever there is something that you don't like, you have to tell them that this is not really what we think is good publicity about Sámi people, or this is not the product. It's just a postcard. So, but that also has to do with to realize that tourism is a business. That is, it's not something that you do on your spare time for free. You have to earn your money when you work with it.
Hmm. When you look at the young people, when you look at people who are studying tourism, uh, are you seeing that calculated in their studies, or are you seeing them kind of more with kind of more flimsy ideas of the culture is great, but at the end of the day, it's a postcard.
Now, I would say that they actually see it for what it is, and there are, as I said earlier, good examples where we can prove that people is actually willing to pay for and pay a lot of money for experiencing our culture. It's stating good examples that you don't have to sell out or to do things for free because you like to get the information out.
Hmm.
Um, so it's I think it's essential that we state that this is business. You can't show up your reindeers for free because even reindeers need to eat, and food costs money. So I mean, there's like sometimes you have to explain things like that because some people would think that we should be happy just showing our culture, but we don't have a need for showing it up, so we can actually make people pay for studying our culture.
Hmm. Oh, great view, great view. Uh, are there any things that you'd like to see come out of Indigenous Peoples Week? Anything that in your view, would mark this as a successful week of dialogue and concert and conversation?
Well, first of all, more participants. Um, it's I mean, right now it's more or less you and me speaking, and there will be some more during the week, but not many enough. I would be very happy if we could have people, both indigenous and non-indigenous, that followed us and had questions or ideas about how to go further. And also the participation on other media than the Hangouts. So we can see more tweets, more Facebook things, or more comments, more shares.
I agree. I agree. You know what I think at this point, what I'm looking forward, what I'm already very pleased with is the discussion on outbounding,
Yeah.
and we've had a good dialogue. We've had a good beginning of. It's hard to say. You know, the question is the word like dialogue, and honestly, it's very difficult to have a conversation when you're not breathing the same air and you're not aware of the other person. You know, we have these, you know, two-dimensional screens in front of us, but, you know, we're not able to use our other senses. And I think that, you know, certainly diminishes the level of, you know, true conversation and dialogue that we can have. You know, it's always been my hope that, you know, we could have people create satellite events or parallel events in which, you know, we do something out in the field. And I was able to do that a little bit there in Oaxaca, but, you know, outside of that, it just never went anywhere. Uh, I'm still, I'm pleased with where we've come with this. I'm pleased with the discussion that's been broached, as I say, on outbounding. My fingers are crossed that we get some people to join the Indigenous tourism pages and communities on Facebook and on Google Plus to share some of what's happening. Um, and again, if we can get people to be much more active. But, you know, as always with the online world, you know, everyone wants a more engaging conversation, but they don't want to be engaging themselves. So the question is how to get these wallflowers to share something. As I say, you know, if it's a, you know, if you're Indigenous and you have your culture or your crafts or your tours, this is the you know, open house, the welcome mat to say, please, you know, share what you're doing. You know, we'd love to hear about these events. We'd love to hear about your food, your crafts, again, whatever you'd like to share in public. And again, it's unabashedly about travel and tourism. So, if you have secrets, please keep them a secret. But if you want people to book a tour or come to your restaurant, then please speak out. I was having a conversation a little bit with Ethan Gelber and just saying, the other thing that we could do this week or later on, the obstacle we have is the English language. And I know so many friends and contacts who speak Spanish, or even Spanglish, but they're not that. Again, they could be much more benefited if they were able to speak their native language, or at least the Spanish language. So many of the Oaxacan friends speak Spanish as a second language. One of the things I have in common with them. But all right, how do we create those dialogues? And again, the question is, how do we scale up this as a conversation that's not just in English?
Why not make them in Spanish? I mean, there's a whole lot of people speaking Spanish out there.
The offer is open.
Yeah.
As I say, I'll be happy to schedule any Hangouts this week or afterward about this, and I'll happily organize something in English or Spanish. If anyone wants to have a conversation in Russian or French or Zapotec or Sámi, you folks organize it yourselves. But yeah, I'd like to see more participants, and I'd love to see some greater understanding of these cultures. I'm hoping we get some more contacts from the Maori world in New Zealand. But at the end of the day, it's about people actually learning how to use this darn social web stuff and going forward with it. And I think there's a lot of hand-holding that has to happen for it to be successful.
Ron, can you please explain how if they like to participate, what should they do really? If somebody listens to this one and they like to participate, how should they do?
I think if anyone's watching this right now, if anyone's watching the video, then they should, give the video a thumbs up. Be thankful that we've had at least the conversation open, but please post a comment on the video itself. When you're on YouTube and you're signed into YouTube, you also have access to the big Google world, and we do have that Google community on Indigenous tourism, and the links are provided. Make sure we share that with you, and again, use that as a tool. But again, the number one piece of advice is to recognize there's not a single path. There are around, there are 5 or 10 different paths that radiate out. You have to choose yourself what makes sense to you and what you can commit to. Whether it's Indigenous or non-Indigenous, one of the problems I think of anyone over 30 is thinking that if they do something just once, it should work wonders. And none of these things work wonders if you just do it once. If you put some pictures on Flickr one time and nothing else, it doesn't, have any effectiveness. If you post photos on Flickr on a regular basis, or if you're favoriting or giving a star to other people's photos, then that has some sort, then it draws people in. Same thing with Twitter. If you're going to tweet every 6 months or every 9 months, it doesn't make any sense. And how many dead Twitter accounts are out there? So the suggestion is to budget some time and to choose the easiest, I would say, whether that's Facebook or the Twitter or the YouTube, and to interact. If you're watching this and don't leave a comment, again, we can't really respond to you. If you are, and again, a special message to the Indigenous-owned businesses, just let us know what you're doing, and let us help spread that message. It may not become a viral video or a viral tweet, but we will be able to get the message out there, and the odds are you will get more followers and people aware of what you're doing.
And don't forget to use the hashtag IPW4.
That's right. And
And we
the
will pay some
hashtag is that
attention.
pound sign and IPW. That's Indigenous Peoples Week, and the number 4. Hmm.
At least we will pay some attention then.
That's right. That's right. So it should be good. Uh, I'm looking forward. Tomorrow we are having a chat a little bit earlier than today's chat with the friends from Outbounding, and we may be scheduling something with our friends from New Zealand, Nail, happy birthday, and Kaylee. Um, but to me, it's an open book. At the very least, I'll be updating the Planeta Wiki and embedding the information on the relevant pages.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, everybody. We've had 0 questions. Hey, that has to change. Um,
At least you and I had a nice chat.
we've had a good chat, and for me, that makes it worthwhile. And I would know nothing but nothing about the Sámi culture if it weren't for you, and I'm glad that you've been very generous with your connections as well, so that you know it, we've seen the Sámi culture in a wider perspective, not just the view from Kiruna.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping we get some more people, and I think we will be able to measure the success of this at this time next week, and my fingers are crossed that we will both be surprised by some of the interactions.
Yeah.
And with that, anything else you'd like to say, or is it time to wrap up?
No, I think we can wrap it up for today, and happy to speak to you, and see you again sometimes later this week.
Very good. All right, stay online, and I'll end the broadcast here.